And here is number one for the first round at the number 4 pick. These are his top 3 players. Number 1 is Reed Sheppard. We've talked about this, Ethan and I have. Um, he has Stephon as his number 1 player at number 4. I have Reed Sheppard there. You guys probably saw that in the big board video that I did a couple weeks ago as well. So I agree with this. I think the shooting splits, the defense, all of the little things and fundamentals that he has, and just as much of a sure thing that Reed Sheppard is, I feel like at number 4, he's the most sure of a sure thing that you can get, with the least amount of holes to poke, just in his profile as a prospect. So let's see what Gavoni has to say. Why Sheppard is such a great fit next to Wembanyama. The Spurs were a fraction of a percentage point from being ranked the worst three-point shooting team in the NBA at 34.7% last season. Wembanyama's greatest gift offensively is his shot creation. He ranked 5th in the NBA in usage last season, 32.3%, something that will likely grow as the Spurs better utilize his talent operating out of the low post as a pick-and-roll ball handler and a one-on-one isolation prowess from the mid or high post. It will be very important to surround Wembanyama with enough floor spacing to ensure entire defenses don't collapse on his drives every time he puts the ball down. I know me and Ethan have mentioned this. It feels like 1,000 times since this game this past spring, but the Rockets game, I can't remember exactly what month it was in, but Wemby, it was one of his. I mean, all things considered, he still had a double-double and like 3 or 4 blocks, so it really wasn't a bad game. But at the time of the season, with the way he was progressing, and then really just overall, when you look at his season, it was one of his worst games. And a big part of that was because, as they're saying right here, I don't know if I would. I mean, Keldon, I understand calling him a streaky 3-point shooter, but I still think he's a little bit of a different level than like a Jeremy or a Trey or a Zach. Malachi's kind of probably in the middle of those guys for me personally. I completely agree that Keldon needs to get more consistent with his 3-point shooting, but I wouldn't put him in the same category as Jeremy Sohan or Trey Jones, is I guess what I'm trying to say there. But regardless, the point that he's trying to make still stands. And when I was talking about the Rockets game, they could just clog the paint and leave Jeremy Sohan and Trey Jones open. And when they can't convert, obviously, as I'm saying this, you guys know this, Trey Jones improved at the end of the season and really showed some flashes of promise. But still, for the majority of the season and for the majority of Trey Jones's career, unfortunately, that has been something that teams have been able to game plan. And that's something that, when you have a player like Victor, you don't want teams to just be able to easily clog the paint and leave non-shooters open, and then they've got a good defensive game plan, and you're not even able to utilize one of the most incredible talents we've ever seen. I think y'all get the point there. I'll stop talking. Playing heavy minutes alongside streaky shooters or 3-point shooters such as Jeremy Sohan, Trey Jones, Zach Collins, Malachi Branham, and Keldon Johnson wasn't optimal in that regard last season, and with playoff defenses in mind, that's another really good point, the Spurs will surely need to upgrade here. Enter Sheppard, the best shooter in this draft class, who made a blistering 52% of his 3-pointers at Kentucky. There's other shooting splits, but they're like almost, I don't want to just talk out of my behind here, but like most of his shooting splits are above 50%. And I want to say like the lowest I saw was like 46, 48%. So y'all can fact check me there, but if memory serves, it was like I said, like maybe the lowest percentage I saw was 45, but anywhere from the 45 to 48 range is still like, that's still really good is the point. But still, again, 52% on threes at Kentucky. Sheppard has an excellent feel for creating for the game, creating for others, and is a reliable decision maker who makes the game easy for his teammates with his patient, unselfish approach. A lot of backdoors from Reed, a lot of bounce passes, through traffic that I remember from his tape. He's definitely, as much as, still, we saw a lot of things that jumped off the screen at the combine for him athleticism wise, but maybe, when he has the ball in his hands, if you watch the tape, it doesn't look the same as like a Rob Dillingham who's on the same team as him. But even with that in mind, in traffic and I don't know if it's necessarily an isolation situation, but when he has the ball in his hands and he's driving to the rim, he can create for others. And he's not just, going in one dimensional, like I'm going to go try to get a bucket here. If he's driving inside, he's keeping, he's seeing the floor fully. Maybe that will turn into, a little pull-up mid-range jumper or driving to the rim to get a layup. But sometimes it'll turn, into a bounce pass backdoor cut that leads to an assist for Sheppard. Or maybe he finds, a shooter after he draws two driving to the rim, on the perimeter. The point is, he's always looking to pass, even though he has the ability to pull up, or go get a layup. Sheppard wasn't prolific operating out of the pick and roll. And that's kind of why I was saying I wasn't sure if it was isolation situations. I wasn't sure how to describe it because it wasn't necessarily him coming off like a pick or something like that. More of that I remember is like almost like they're saying here, creating for others, like just with the ball in his hand when he's driving to the rim. At times playing with brakes on at Kentucky more than one would hope. But he did show sparks of ability making intelligent reads out of ball screens. So that's true too. But the other thing that we've got to remember here, and ironically, another Kentucky point guard is right below here. We'll get to him in a second. And I've said this a million times. You guys already know this. But for the viewers who are maybe watching this channel for the first time, Kentucky had a ton of guards. Antonio Reeves, Rob Dillingham, DJ Wagner was supposed to be a top 10 pick going into this season. The point that I'm saying here is maybe if he's on a different team without, as many like 5-star guards, he might be running out of the pick and roll a little bit more. And I think if, you need to adjust to playing the pick and roll, I think Wemby might be one of the easier players to adjust with in the league. I mean, with that being said, it's not just going to be all fine and dandy. We learned that last year. It's going to take some time to learn. But I mean, when I think of the two-man game in the pick and roll with Devin Vassell and Victor Wembanyama, and then I think of Reed Sheppard's skill set, even though they aren't exactly the same, I think that definitely Reed Sheppard in the pick and roll with Wemby would figure itself out. I'll put it that way. This is an area he can continue to grow in alongside Wembanyama, who is one of the league's best lob targets, but also dangerous popping out beyond the three-point line, operating out of short rolls, and finishing with tremendous touch and creativity, rolling to the rim with his 8-foot wingspan. Sheppard's team-first mentality, for example, happily coming off the bench all season at Kentucky, even though he should have been starting, make him well-suited for playing in the shadow of Wembanyama and all that comes along with that. And before we get into Rob Dillingham here at number 2, which is interesting for me, obviously, I've talked about the appeal, and I was very high on Rob Dillingham. And even as he's maybe slid down my big board a little bit, he's still somebody that I would be very happy with the Spurs picking at 4 or 8. I probably would prefer somebody else at 4, but if the Spurs are picking him at 4, that tells me they really believe in what he can become, so I would trust that. But at the same time, I was forgetting exactly what I was going to say there. Going back to this, Reed Sheppard's team-first mentality, he had a comment at the NBA Combine during his interviews. It was a clip that I saw on Twitter just, asking about, what he feels like his role on a team is going to be or what he wants to do. How does he see himself in the NBA on a team? And he just basically said, I just want to do whatever the team needs to help me. I feel like I'm fundamental. Like when I talk about the fundamentals, even he was saying, he's like, I feel like I can contribute in a lot of areas, and whatever the coaches and the team ask for me for what's best for us to win, that's what I want to do. And that's why I compare him to Derek White so much. I know we did another video where we compared Devin Carter to Derek White in a lot of ways. And I think that maybe Reed Sheppard, I mean, it's just so hard. You don't know with this draft. We're just going to have to see how it plays out. But I've said this before, and I'll say this again. I feel like almost Reed Sheppard's floor is Derek White. And maybe his ceiling isn't like that much higher than that. Maybe it is. Maybe it's higher than I think. But I think like at the worst, he's going to be that type of player. And those type of comments and just this last paragraph here from Gavoni, that's another reason why I feel like it's so comparable to Derek. Because if you think about the finals this year, even the whole playoff run, there will be some games where Derek scores 5 points. And then like the beginning of the playoffs, he was like scoring more than at one point in the first 2 rounds. Maybe it was just the first round, but it was one of those 2 rounds. I remember seeing this all over Twitter from StatMuse. He had more points than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Jason Tatum. Anyways, I know I'm going on a Derek White rant here, but the whole reason I'm bringing this up is like, you can see in the last finals game, even though he kept shooting, he didn't really have the best offensive game. But there's been other games where he's had, he's been one of the top 3 scorers on the team when Tatum has an off night. He does whatever it takes. And so that's the comparison I'm trying to make with Reed and Derek there. I hope y'all got that.